The fateful accident. The quiet suburbs of Connecticut were still wrapped in twilight when tragedy struck the Thomas family. Emily Thomas, recently graduated from college and eager to start her new job in Boston, woke early that October morning, the chill of autumn already seeping through the old window panes. She tiptoed downstairs and paused at the kitchen doorway, watching her parents move in effortless rhythm. Her father, Robert, pouring coffee, her mother, Margaret, humming softly as she toasted bread. Across the kitchen island sat Sarah, her 16-year-old sister, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone, half listening to their parents' gentle banter about weekend plans and school projects. No one could have predicted that this ordinary morning, filled with laughter, the aroma of cinnamon, and the clatter of breakfast, would be the last time the Thomas sisters would see their parents alive. Later that day, everything changed. The accident happened just after noon. Robert and Margaret had left home to finalize some paperwork concerning a recent family property purchase. "We'll be back in a few hours. Don't burn down the house," Margaret had joked, car keys jangling in her hand. The girls had laughed, waving their parents off from the porch. Emily holding up a coffee mug as a goodbye salute, Sarah with her ever-present headphones around her neck. A little over 2 hours later, the phone rang. It was the state police. The voice on the other end sounded distant, clinical, and impossibly gentle as he explained that there had been a collision on Route 27. Their parents' SUV had swerved, left the road, and struck a guardrail. When Emily first heard the words, fatal accident, her mind refused to process them. She simply stared at the wall, numb, as Sarah's face crumpled in slow motion beside her. The next days passed in a haze of disbelief and sorrow. Neighbors arrived with casseroles and awkward embraces. Emily answered the door to local friends, social workers, and relatives she barely recognized. Funeral arrangements consumed entire afternoons, selecting photographs for the service, speaking with the church pastor, coordinating with the lawyer, who now handled everything with an unnerving briskness. For Sarah, the loss left her adrift. She wandered through the rooms of their Victorian home in silence, sometimes clutching their mother's shawl or leafing through old family albums. Emily, now the eldest and suddenly responsible for everything, struggled to keep herself and her little sister anchored against the storm of grief. At night, when the house was silent and the steady tick of the grandfather clock echoed through the halls, Emily would lie awake reviewing the details, replaying every memory. She worried about Sarah, about bills and legal procedures, about what would become of the life they had all planned together. She wondered if she would ever hear her parents' voices again, if their laughter would return to these empty rooms. Days bled into weeks. The rhythm of normalcy seemed irreparably broken, replaced by a fragile routine of responsibilities that Emily had never imagined bearing at 25. And in the rare moments of quiet, she found herself haunted by small details that didn't quite add up about the day of the accident. But in those early days, grief was too heavy, and every attempt to analyze the past slipped away, lost in the crushing immediacy of loss. The Thomas sisters, once carefree, were now bound together, not just by blood, but by a profound sense of absence. A new world defined by questions without answers, and love struggling to survive in the aftermath of fate's cruel turn. The will and the oddities the days after the funeral unfolded in a surreal fog. The Thomas home, once vibrant with warmth, was now thick with silence. broken only by the occasional knock at the door or the distant chime of the grandfather clock. It was during these heavy days that Emily and Sarah received the call to attend the reading of their parents' will. The meeting took place at the law office of Harold M. Miller, the family's attorney of nearly 2 decades. The brick building sat wedged between a florist and a bakery, familiar and unremarkable. But on this day, it felt cold and foreboding. Emily held Sarah's trembling hand as they entered the oak-paneled conference room, the walls lined with hardbound legal volumes and faded certificates. Their aunt, Linda Peterson, Margaret's younger sister, was already seated at the table, her crisp blazer a stark contrast to the sisters' subdued attire. Linda offered them a tight smile, her eyes shrouded by large sunglasses, though the room was dim. Mr. Miller greeted them with a sympathetic nod before getting straight to business. He retrieved a thick file from his briefcase and began to read the will in a steady, almost detached tone. The document outlined the particulars: the family home, a portfolio of investments, stock in the modest Thomas family business, and a sizable life insurance policy. Both girls leaned in, expecting that Emily, being of age and recently graduated, would be named guardian and executor. But as the details emerged, Emily's heart sank.
This is worse than I thought.
The entire estate, home, business interests, savings, would be placed in a trust, with Aunt Linda named as sole trustee. Linda would retain full control of all assets until Sarah reached 18, and Emily, lacking sufficient experience and stability, was to have no decision-making authority over the family's wealth or property. Emily's only responsibility was to provide companionship and support for her younger sister, while major life and financial choices rested in Linda's hands. Emily's mind reeled. She recalled snippets of earlier conversations with her parents, how they'd always insisted on fairness, how they believed in her responsibility. None of it matched what she was hearing. Now, she stole a glance at Sarah, who seemed lost in her own confusion, her eyes wide and unfocused. Aunt Linda's demeanor was oddly triumphant. She handed Emily a handkerchief, feigning concern, and repeated with sugar-coated firmness,
So the plan is,
"It's only until Sarah is
you wear
18.
when
This
speak
is
with
all
Linda.
for your own good. I know how hard this is."
I just think it would
But
be
her
nice to clear the
reassurances
air.
didn't ring true. There was something forced
I
and
am not
rehearsed
sure
in
what
her
you mean.
words. As Mr. Miller moved
Well,
through the clauses,
Children usually don't
Emily
understand
noticed his
adult
discomfort.
finances.
He avoided eye contact, rushing past critical paragraphs. When Emily pressed for clarification, why wasn't she, as the eldest, given any say in the estate? Mr. Miller simply repeated, "This is what your parents wanted. It's best for everyone in these circumstances."
I have the forms.
Something about the way he said it, the tremor underlying his voice, left Emily unsettled. The next morning, Linda wasted no time asserting her authority. She arrived at the Thomas house before breakfast, already on the phone with the family's accountant
Linda
and
offered me an
insisting that they
incentive to
begin
keep
sorting
quiet about
through her
late-night
sister's
visit to the
desk.
study.
She claimed it was necessary for tax purposes, but Emily saw no legal reason for this
specifically
sudden
remember seeing
urgency.
Linda destroy
Linda
the
began
envelopes.
making decisions without consulting Emily, adjusting schedules, canceling previously planned family donations, even making changes to Sarah's private school tuition payments. Sarah,
And be ready with
still in the
counter.
throes of grief, was easily swayed by their aunt's gentle promises and reminders that she only wanted what was best. She began to spend more time in Linda's company, shopping trips, spa appointments,
So, about the college
even new
planning
rules
meeting.
about visitors, while conversations with Emily grew brief and distant. Emily's suspicions deepened as
have to
Linda
talk
grew
about the money
cagey
movement, Linda.
about finances and reluctant to answer straightforward questions. A simple inquiry about who handled the business's sale of shares was met with a polite but firm, "Don't worry yourself about adult matters, Emily." When Emily requested copies of the trust documents, Linda smiled thinly and insisted that the lawyer would provide everything in due time. Determined not to be sidelined, Emily began making her own inquiries, asking the family's accountant and questioning former employees of their parents' business. Yet, she was met with stonewalling at every turn. Messages went unreturned, and promises of looking into things yielded nothing. Every night, Emily's unease grew. Restless, she pored over old emails, financial ledgers, and handwritten notes, searching for any indication of her parents' actual intentions. The sense of injustice gnawed at her. It wasn't just about money. It was about honoring her parents' wishes, protecting her sister, and righting a wrong she could feel, but not yet prove. Outside, the autumn leaves continued to fall, blanketing the Thomas property in red and gold. Inside, the house's foundation seemed to shift beneath Emily's feet, the promise of home and family slipping further away with each new revelation. She resolved, then and there, not to let grief or intimidation decide her future. No matter what the paperwork said, Emily would not rest until she understood how and why everything had changed. Because the story Aunt Linda and the attorney wanted her to believe simply did not add up. The secret behind the aunt. As the Thomas house settled into its new, uneasy normal, the relationship between Emily and Aunt Linda grew more complicated. Linda's presence in the household became a constant, her voice echoing through the halls, her perfume lingering in the otherwise chilly air. She began to subtly reshape the daily routine, introducing rules and disciplines Emily didn't recall from her own upbringing. At first, Emily tried to give Linda the benefit of the doubt. Grief manifested in different ways, she told herself, and perhaps their aunt's need to take charge was her way of coping. Yet, the warmth and laughter that used to fill their home now felt stifled, replaced by Linda's veneer of gentle authority. Linda took over the master bedroom and turned her sister's old study into her private office, keeping the door firmly locked whenever Emily or Sarah walked by. It was the little things that made Emily uneasy. Checks that needed Aunt Linda's signature would frequently be delayed. Family photos quietly disappeared from the mantelpiece, and Linda's answers to questions about the estate were always vague. Emily found herself shut out of conversations with the lawyer, the accountant, and even household staff, all of whom seemed suddenly distant. Sarah, still reeling from their parents' loss, became the center of Linda's attention. Linda lavished her with expensive gifts and outings, shopping trips, spa days, long lunches at exclusive restaurants. She filled Sarah's head with soft reassurances and gentle warnings, telling her that Emily was under a great deal of stress and might need some time to heal. The sisters, who had once confided in each other daily, now found themselves at odds more frequently. Emily noticed her sister withdrawing, keeping secrets, and relying increasingly on Linda for guidance. The turning point for Emily came when she noticed discrepancies in the mail. Bills for home repairs she didn't remember authorizing appeared in Linda's name. A letter from her parents' longtime business partner arrived, addressed blankly to the Thomas family, and Linda intercepted it before Emily could read it. When Emily pressed for more details about the estate, Aunt Linda responded with kindness laced with steel. "All this is temporary, honey. I know your parents would want me to keep things smooth. You really should focus on your job search and looking after Sarah. Emily's unease grew into suspicion after a chance encounter with Mrs. Hillman, their elderly neighbor. "Funny how fast your aunt moved in, Mrs. Hillman," remarked one afternoon as she handed Emily a bag of cookies. "Your mother used to say she was terrible with money, surprised they'd trust her with all this." Emily tried to brush it off, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That evening, Sarah failed to come home until well after dark, claiming she'd forgotten to text Emily about dinner with Linda. Emily's concern clashed with Sarah's new aloofness, their conversation erupting into an argument. Sarah accused Emily of being jealous and paranoid, while Emily struggled to articulate her fear that something about their aunt's behavior simply didn't feel right. Unable to sleep, Emily began her own investigation. She searched the house late at night, looking for documents, files, anything that might explain her parents' decision or Linda's authority over the estate. Linda seemed always one step ahead. The safe in her father's old study was emptied. File drawers, once filled with tax records and property deeds, were now locked or missing entirely. Days passed in tense silence. The sisters' bond, already fraying under the weight of loss, threatened to unravel completely. Sarah drifted further away, spending more time with Linda, whose influence over her grew by the day. Emily, increasingly isolated, realized that she was not only fighting for justice, but for the future of her relationship with her sister. One afternoon, a delivery man arrived with a stack of boxes addressed to Linda, a delivery Emily hadn't been told about. When she asked about them, Linda replied sharply, "Just a few personal items. Don't concern yourself." Yet Emily later overheard her on the phone, discussing bank transfers and sales agreements in hushed tones. It became clear to Emily that Linda was hiding something, and that her mask of benevolent guardianship was thinning. Determined to protect her family's legacy and her sister, Emily resolved to dig deeper, no matter the cost. The secrets circling Aunt Linda, once faint and fleeting, had begun to take shape and would soon force Emily to risk everything to uncover the truth. Revisiting the accident for weeks, the world outside moved on as if nothing had changed. Leaves continued piling on the walkway, and neighbors returned to their routines. But in the Thomas house, time seemed suspended in a gray, anxious twilight. Emily found herself unable to shake the nagging curiosity that pressed at the edges of her grief, a persistent, cold whisper that something had been off since the day her parents died. At first, it was just uneasy memories, a flash of headlights in her mind, the irregular rhythm in the officer's voice during that dreadful phone call, the fact that her parents had driven a road they normally avoided. She told herself it was the mind bending under sorrow. But one evening, as she sorted her father's belongings in the study, she discovered a wrinkled parking receipt, dated mere minutes before the supposed time of the gated crash. Her parents, she realized, had been at a cafe 15 miles from the spot where the accident occurred. An odd detour. The more Emily thought about it, the more discrepancies unraveled. The official accident report arrived by mail, typed in blunt detail. Vehicle lost traction, veered off Route 27, struck a guardrail. She pored over every line, highlighting items that didn't quite fit. According to the report, weather conditions were clear, and the road had been repaved that month. There was no explanation for why her father, an experienced and cautious driver, would have lost control on a straight path he knew so well. The listed witness, a local delivery truck driver, gave a statement that rang strangely vague. Saw the vehicle swerve, thought maybe a tire blew out, But the coroner's notes referenced no tire damage and, oddly, made a brief mention of brake lines, then dropped the subject entirely. Emily's initial attempt to get clarification from the responding officer went nowhere. She called the state police barracks listed on the report and was transferred twice before a weary dispatcher told her the case was closed.
We need to act quickly.
Accident. Nothing further to pursue. Sorry for your loss. The words, delivered with bureaucratic finality, only deepened her suspicion. At night, Emily found herself haunted by images. Her mother's smile at breakfast, the fading memory of the sound her parents' SUV made pulling away from the curb, the strange absence that followed. She began questioning everything about their final hours. Why had they left so suddenly that day? Who had they been meeting for the property paperwork? What was the urgency that took them out on Route 27 at midday? Unable to shake the instinct that she was missing something, Emily resolved to start her own investigation. She knew she couldn't do it alone. After a week of fruitless phone calls and polite refusals, she dialed the number of a private detective she found online. His name was Marty Collins, a former detective with a reputation for thoroughness and a touch of old-school charm. Their first meeting was at a quiet diner just outside town. Marty was in his late 40s, with a salt and pepper beard and the demeanor of a man who'd seen too much but still cared enough to try. Emily arrived tense, clutching a folder of notes and printouts. I know this might sound crazy, she started, hesitating as she slid the folder across the table. But I don't believe my parents' deaths were just an accident. Marty listened patiently, thumbed through her highlighted accident report, and asked pointed, gentle questions. He didn't promise miracles, but he agreed to look into the matter, an agreement that brought Emily more relief than she anticipated. Over the next days, the two worked quietly and methodically. Emily gathered every scrap of information she could find: text records, credit card transactions from her parents' bank, copies of emails about the mysterious property meeting. Marty visited the crash site twice, taking photographs of the guardrail, the road surface, even the wildflowers at the accident's edge. He stopped by the garage where the wrecked SUV was towed and quietly collected a piece of the cut brake line, which, in his opinion, looked tampered with. Meanwhile, Emily paid a visit to the cafe noted on her parents' parking receipt. The barista remembered them, a smiling couple, in and out within 30 minutes, clearly in a hurry. They seemed preoccupied, the young woman recalled. Your mom paid and said they were running late for an appointment with, someone from Bankfield Realty, I think. This lead struck Emily as important. She found a phone number for Bankfield Realty and asked about appointments on the day her parents died. After some back and forth, a secretary finally confirmed a meeting had been scheduled, but was marked canceled by client at the last minute, only 10 minutes before the appointed time. Emily relayed her findings to Marty, who also chased down the so-called eyewitness, the delivery driver named Don Hagen. Hagen, when reached by phone, hedged his recollection, claiming he never actually saw the moment of the crash. Pressed, he admitted, I heard brakes squeal, then looked up. All I saw was dust and smoke. Marty made notes, frowned, and told Emily, sometimes what isn't said tells you more than what is. Emily's investigation put her increasingly at odds with Aunt Linda, who seemed intent on shutting down any discussion of the accident. You need to move on, Linda insisted one morning over coffee. It's unhealthy to dwell on tragedy. Your parents are gone. Dwelling on the past won't bring them back. Linda's carefully chosen words unnerved Emily. as did her rigid insistence that the authorities know best. Undeterred, Emily pressed forward. She and Marty reviewed security camera footage from the nearby intersection where the SUV would have passed en route to Route 27. The local convenience store's manager, sympathetic to Emily's loss, allowed them to watch grainy, time-stamped video. Sure enough, her parents' SUV appeared at exactly the time indicated on the parking receipt. But then, something strange happened. Seconds later, a dark sedan pulled out after them and followed at a distance. Marty was cautious. "Could be a coincidence," he said. "But let's keep an eye out for that car." Emily felt her heart race. Vague doubts were taking the shape of something more concrete. When Emily returned home, she found Sarah in her room, AirPods in, staring at her phone. Their relationship, strained by grief and Linda's influence, had grown distant. Still, Emily tried each day to reach her. That night, sitting on Sarah's bed under the muted glow of a reading lamp, she gently broached the subject. "Did you ever notice anything strange about the day Mom and Dad died?"
I have everything.
Sarah looked
just like you
confused,
asked.
at
Let's see
first
what you've got.
defensive, and then, after a pause, admitted, "I did see Mom whispering to Aunt Linda when they left. I couldn't hear what they said.
Oh my goodness.
Mom seemed, I don't know, anxious." That flicker of memory felt like another thread to tug. Emily's mind raced with possibilities, her determination
I want my
hardening.
reality in the
She
world.
spent hours afterward cataloging every detail and theory, building timelines and cross-checking receipts. Marty made arrangements for a trusted mechanic
Today,
to
I
examine
choose
photos of the
for
SUV's
myself
brake
and
line.
for every woman
He
who
later
has ever been
confirmed the
silenced.
part showed unusual marks, likely from tampering. As
You
autumn
deserve the
deepened
kindness that
and
comes
the
your
air
way.
at night grew
It is
sharper,
not your fault.
Emily became increasingly
I am
wary
willing
of
to
Linda,
offer you a more generous
who now
financial
watched her
settlement in
with a
exchange for
sharp
your
eye,
silence.
always seeming to appear when Emily lingered
Sign the
by the
non-disclosure
office
agreement,
or tried
and
to
you publicly
retrieve
support the
old
campaign.
financial files. Meanwhile,
can't.
Marty's investigation began to turn up connections between Linda and the banker who handled her parents' accounts, and rumors of substantial withdrawals made just
We have
days
him.
after the funeral.
The evidence is solid.
Emily realized she was racing against time and secrecy. Each new discovery raised more questions,
We are here
but
to
also
challenge
brought the
narrative
truth
presented by the
into clearer
defense.
focus. She no longer doubted herself. She was sure something malicious had happened,
Oh, that was
and
so
that whoever was
funny.
responsible was growing nervous. Standing at her bedroom window late at night, Emily watched the wind spin russet leaves across the drive. The world felt colder, but beneath her fear, a sense of purpose burned. For her parents, for Sarah, and for the promise of justice, Emily resolved she would not stop until every mystery was brought into the light. The conspiracy to steal the inheritance. The cool, steady march of autumn continued outside the windows, while tensions escalated inside the Thomas house. Emily's discoveries about the accident had already shattered her peace, but her alarm grew with each new hint of deceit
Please,
in
I
the
need to talk to
management
Grace.
of her
It's
parents'
urgent.
estate. The atmosphere thickened with mistrust, not only between Emily and Aunt
I
Linda,
never wanted to
but,
hurt you.
heartbreakingly, between the Thomas sisters themselves. Emily took to keeping a notebook hidden in a hollow book on her shelf, documenting every odd interaction with Linda and every small slip she witnessed. A curious phone call cut short as she entered the room. Receipts Linda tried to pocket before Emily could read them. The constant, suspicious visits from the family's accountant, Mr. Bradley. Emily's days blurred into a routine of forced politeness and private sleuthing. She woke up
Grace, I
replaying
am
the
so
last
sorry
words
for
of
not
her
believing
parents.
you.
She often felt she was an
share
intruder
my
in her
story
own
too.
home, One rainy Friday morning, while rummaging through the cluttered drawers in her father's study, Emily stumbled upon what felt like a breakthrough. Behind a dusty stack of old bank statements, she discovered a notarized letter with her parents' signatures. Its contents were damningly at odds with the trust documents Linda presented at the will reading. This letter, dated only a week before the fatal accident, named both Emily and Sarah as equal beneficiaries and explicitly appointed Emily as executor should anything happen. There was no mention of Linda as trustee, nor any restriction on the girl's inheritance. Goosebumps crawled down Emily's arms as she read and reread the note. Had her parents truly changed their wishes that suddenly, or had someone manipulated the paperwork after their deaths? The findings pushed Emily into overdrive. She photographed the letter, stored the image in a password-protected folder, then carefully returned the original to its hiding place. She called Marty, her trusted private investigator, and arranged a late-night meeting away from the eyes and ears of the Thomas household. Over mugs of bitter coffee in a 24-hour diner, Emily slid the photograph across the table. Marty's face darkened as he read the document. If this is genuine, Emily, he said gravely, then someone's forged legal papers and possibly even coerced your family's attorney. We'll have to tread carefully. Meanwhile, Linda's behavior became more brazen. She took over arranging business dealings, holding meetings in her new office, and locking away critical files. Emily was increasingly left out of discussions regarding the family company and their investments. Staff members, who once smiled warmly at Emily and Sarah, now greeted her with guarded expressions or avoided her altogether. A breakthrough arrived when Marty, through his network, managed to gain the confidence of Melissa, a junior employee at the bank where the estate's finances were handled. Nervous and apologetic, Melissa confirmed that significant sums had been moved around hastily, just days after Robert and Margaret's funeral. I know it looked weird, she whispered during a hurried call from the parking lot. Ms. Peterson, your aunt. She pushed everything through so fast. She even got Mr. Bradley to vouch for urgent transfers and changes to signatory rights. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be talking to you. Emily's gratitude poured out as she reassured Melissa her secret was safe. Compelled to dig deeper, Emily stealthily accessed Linda's home office, while Linda and Sarah were away on another afternoon shopping spree. Picking the lock, a skill she never thought she'd have to use, she rifled quickly through the desk and cabinets. She found several suspicious documents, copies of wire transfers to out-of-state accounts, legal correspondence with firms she didn't recognize, and handwritten notes detailing discussions with Mr. Bradley and someone at Bankfield Realty. But the most damning piece emerged from an unsuspecting place. Slipped between magazines in Linda's briefcase was a draft letter to Mr. Miller, the family attorney. In the letter, Linda rehearsed manipulative talking points, referencing ways to reassure the girls and to emphasize their dependence. Phrases like, Emily doesn't have the head for business or complex legal matters, and for Sarah's emotional stability, decisions must remain centralized, made Emily's blood run cold. Back in her room, Emily pieced documents across the floor, constructing a mental map. There was a clear pattern. Linda's web extended through their parents' lawyer, the family accountant, and at least one banker. It involved backdated documents, hastily signed finance forms, and the sudden, unexplainable restriction of the family trust. Sarah, meanwhile, was slowly beginning to see cracks in Linda's facade. The shift started with a small betrayal. Linda had promised to support Sarah's application
Good evening.
for a
Tonight's
coveted
top
art
story,
program,
Thomas Evans
but
has
weeks
been
passed
found
with no
guilty.
follow-up.
I
When
was wrong
Sarah
to ever
asked
trust
about it,
him.
Linda brushed her off, claiming she was
We all
too
were.
overwhelmed, managing the estate to worry about extracurriculars. Soon, other promises, shopping sprees, meetings with friends,
Mr. Evans,
weekend
are you guilty of
getaways
fraud?
were broken,
Did you
each
misappropriate?
with another vague excuse. The tipping point came one evening when Sarah overheard Linda on a tense phone call in her locked office. Peering through the doorway when Linda stormed out in frustration, Sarah caught a glimpse of her own name and account numbers scrawled on a notepad near the phone. Growing uneasy, Sarah began to question past events. Her dependence on Linda faded with each revelation. When Sarah shyly broached her suspicions with Emily, the sisters' long-frayed bond began to mend. Emily, relieved to finally have her sister's trust, gently explained what she had uncovered about the inheritance, showing Sarah select documents and carefully easing her into the investigation without overwhelming her. They whispered late into the night, sharing theories and worries, their old camaraderie flickering back to life amid crisis. Armed with growing evidence and her sister's support, Emily returned to Marty, determined to take legal action. Marty, ever cautious, stressed the importance of gathering irrefutable proof and identifying trustworthy allies. We'll need recordings, eyewitnesses, concrete documents, anything the court can't dismiss as conjecture. Together, they drafted a plan. Sarah would wear a hidden recorder when speaking with Linda and Mr. Bradley, and Emily would secure digital copies of every suspicious bank and legal document she could find. Careful not to tip their hand, the sisters worked covertly for days. Emily scheduled meetings with lawyers unaffiliated with the family to get objective advice. Sarah, finding renewed purpose, began quietly polling trusted teachers and friends for information about her accounts and promised scholarships, looking for missing money or falsified approvals. Days of secrecy stretched their nerves thin. Linda's growing paranoia led her to question every movement, and she occasionally lashed out at Emily in front of the staff, letting flashes of her true temperament show. Yet, aided by Marty's guidance and a circle of silent, watchful supporters like Melissa, the Thomas sisters slowly constructed a comprehensive case. Proof of forgeries, evidence of coerced staff testimony, and a money trail leading directly to Linda's hidden personal accounts. On the eve of their decisive move, Emily stood with Sarah by their parents' portrait in the quiet living room. "We're almost there, Sarah," she murmured, her voice steady, despite months of exhaustion. "No matter what, we're going to finish what Mom and Dad started. We're going to make this right." Outside, rain lashed the windows, but within the Thomas house, for the first time since the accident, a fragile hope began to build. The counterattack plan. Emily awoke to an unfamiliar sense of purpose. In the soft, blue-gray of pre-dawn, the once ominous silence of the Thomas house felt almost bracing, a canvas, waiting for careful resolve. Everything she and Sarah had gathered, the paper trail, the evidence of forgery, the hidden recordings, would amount to nothing if they could not act decisively and exploit the cracks in Aunt Linda's elaborate facade. At breakfast, Emily found Sarah at the kitchen table, tracing the rim of her tea mug in anxious circles, the light from her phone casting flickers across her face. They locked eyes for a moment, and in that silent exchange, years of shared secrets and sibling rivalry were replaced by something sturdier, an alliance forged in adversity. "Are you ready?" Emily whispered, and Sarah nodded, her expression raw but resolute. The girls reviewed their plan, mapping every detail on colored note cards lined up on Emily's bedroom desk. The plan had 3 stages: gather irrefutable evidence, assemble trustworthy allies, and strike quickly. Marty had been explicit in his warnings. Linda's the type who'll burn the whole house down before letting anyone else win. Expect her to fight dirty. Stage 1, securing evidence. Sarah, nervous but brave, began stealthily recording every encounter with Aunt Linda, using a hidden app on her phone. She captured conversations with Linda and the family's accountant, Mr. Bradley, careful to keep her manner warm, her questions innocent. She listened as Linda casually dismissed Emily's skill, alluding to children not being capable of understanding adult finances. More chilling were the moments Sarah caught Linda quietly pressuring Mr. Bradley about making sure the documents are aligned and protecting our interests. Emily, meanwhile, spent long hours digitizing every suspicious document she could find, scanned bank transfers, emails about asset sales, even deleted drafts Linda had failed to permanently erase from the office computer. Late one evening, Emily managed to record a heated phone conversation between Linda and a lawyer, catching phrases like paperwork discrepancy and just keep pushing them off until the deadline passes. With Marty's help, the sisters organized the recordings and files into a secure cloud drive, making sure that even if their devices were confiscated or destroyed, the truth would survive. Stage 2, assembling allies. One crucial difference between the girls and Linda was community. Linda, though equipped with legal maneuvering and intimidation, remained an outsider. She never truly understood the fabric of kindness and loyalty that the Thomas family had spent years weaving. Emily knew she needed to tap into that network. They started by reaching out to Melissa, the bank employee who had already confided suspicions to Emily. With Marty as a quiet go-between, Melissa agreed to serve as a witness, even offering copies of suspicious withdrawal forms she'd seen processed under duress. Sarah's art teacher, Mrs. Green, provided a statement about the scholarship application Linda had mishandled, while the Thomas family's old housekeeper, Mrs. Alvarez, revealed that Linda once offered her an incentive to keep quiet about a late-night visit to the study after the funeral. Even Mrs. Hillman, their elderly neighbor, jotted down memories of Linda's behavior and testified to seeing Linda destroy envelopes addressed to the sisters. Marty also made progress. He managed to quietly approach Mr. Miller, the family's conflicted attorney. Though Miller was clearly rattled, the mounting pressure and his professional conscience forced him to admit, off the record, that much of the trust paperwork had been drafted behind closed doors at Linda's urging, and some signatures looked questionable. While he'd feared legal consequences and reputational ruin, Marty encouraged Miller to consider his own liability and how coming forward now could preserve at least some dignity later. Stage 3, preparing the strike. With every piece in place, Emily and Sarah rehearsed their approach with Marty, running through likely scenarios and rehearsing answers to hostile questioning in court and in private. Marty warned them never to confront Linda head-on when they were alone. Confrontation without witnesses could put everything at risk. Sarah volunteered for the most courageous and dangerous task. She agreed to provoke Linda, gently nudging her into revealing her manipulations on tape, all while wearing a discreet recorder sewn into her jacket. On the morning of the counterattack, Sarah lingered in Linda's office with a question about college planning. Linda, busy shredding papers, barely looked up. "Aunt Linda, can you explain why so much money was moved last month? Mr. Bradley says you had urgent reasons." But Emily's upset. Linda's eyes sharpened into a glare. She set the shredder aside. "Sarah, this isn't your concern. I'm protecting this family. Your sister is naive. She doesn't understand how dangerous it would be to let inexperience ruin what your parents worked for." "But," Sarah pressed gently, "didn't they want Emily to help?" Linda's mask faltered. "Your mother and father wanted security and order," she replied, her tone slippery. "I was merely more persuasive about what needed to be done. Sometimes the law gets in the way of what's right. You wouldn't understand now, but you might thank me someday." Unbeknownst to Linda, every word was being recorded and uploaded in real time to Marty's secure folder. Outside the door, Emily's pulse hammered as she listened, hands shaking. The tone of Linda's voice, the tightening bitterness when describing persuading her sister and brother-in-law. It was more than enough to confirm their worst fears. The final step, bringing truth to light. Emily and Sarah pooled the interviews, files, witness statements, and hours of audio into a meticulous portfolio. Marty compiled everything, cross-referenced each document, and prepared their presentation for law enforcement and the probate court. On the eve of their legal action, Emily sent a single, encrypted email to Mr. Miller, alerting him to the evidence and promising that full disclosure of both cooperation and obstruction would be shared with authorities. She and Sarah drafted letters to childhood friends and neighbors, explaining what might happen in the coming days, not only asking for support, but for vigilance in case Linda tried to retaliate against them or others. That night, the sisters finally slept, side by side in Sarah's bed, exhausted but unbroken. The house, so long haunted by tension and fear, felt different. Quieter, yes, but also steadier, as if their courage could finally reclaim some corner of ordinary warmth. They awoke to the sound of heavy rain and the resolute patter of hope. The battle was not yet over, but for the first time, Emily and Sarah were not merely victims of loss. They were survivors fighting back, wielding truth like a shield, and trusting that the system, despite all its flaws, could still deliver justice. The tense confrontation. An unspoken tension buzzed in the air as the storm rolled in over Connecticut. For days, an almost surgical calm had settled over the Thomas home, the sisters clinging silently to their plan, while Linda maintained her watchful, territorial bristle. But the evidence had been gathered, files copied and backed up, statements secured. Now all that remained was the confrontation itself. That morning, the sky hung low and gray. Sarah left for school early, with a hug squeezed a bit longer than usual. She was carrying the miniature recorder stitched into her jacket, charged and ready for any overheard confession. Emily watched her go, her guts wound tight with anxiety. On her phone was Marty's prearranged alert. "If anything goes wrong, or if you sense imminent danger, call me immediately. The police and the lawyer are on standby." Linda entered the kitchen moments later, impeccably dressed, but her eyes darted about the room, suspicious and irritable. She poured herself coffee, fingers tapping on her phone as if searching for the next loose thread to tug or snip. By midday, Linda grew impatient. "Emily, I need to review all the account statements and recent mail," she demanded, voice sharp, eyes narrowing as she studied Emily's face. "Bring them up to the study. Now, please." Emily complied, careful not to betray the care with which she had duplicated every significant document. As she laid the folders before Linda, she caught a glimpse at her aunt's laptop. She recognized the letterhead of an out-of-state bank. Linda, noticing her gaze, slammed the lid closed. "Family business is for family, Emily. Not everything requires your involvement," she sneered. For a moment, Emily considered confronting Linda outright. Instead, she drew a steady breath and played her part. "If you need help sorting through anything, let me know." Linda offered a thin smile, but suspicion coiled in her posture. That afternoon, in a rare show of goodwill, Linda suggested they talk things out over tea in the sunroom. Emily's heart pounded as she took her seat, the porcelain cup trembling almost imperceptibly in her hand. Linda began with small talk, but the conversation turned swiftly. "You've been going through my things, haven't you?" Linda's tone was deceptively light, but her words landed like a hammer. "There are files missing, drawers left unlocked, things I never expected from you." Emily's mind raced, but she managed a feigned look of shock. "Why would I do that? The only things I want are answers. I've felt lost." Linda's eyes narrowed. "I'm not stupid, Emily. You've been meeting with someone. Private investigator, perhaps. You should be careful. Sometimes digging brings up things better left buried." It was a threat, the first of the day, and Emily bit back a retort, realizing the real danger was far from over. That night, Sarah returned home later than usual, her expression anxious. She whispered to Emily in the hallway, "Linda got a call from Mr. Bradley. She knows something's up." The girls retreated to their room, reviewing the recordings and carefully listing their next moves. Marty reached briefly on the speaker, stressed urgency. "We have enough to take to the authorities, but you two need to stay vigilant. Linda might act out of desperation if she suspects she's cornered." Neither slept. Every creak of the house felt like a harbinger. Around midnight, the calm shattered. A sharp crash echoed from the study. Emily rushed out, her phone in hand, to find Linda tearing through drawers with a look of wild panic. "What did you take?" Linda shrieked, barely coherent. "You think you can steal from me? From this family?" Emily kept her distance. "Please, Aunt Linda, there's nothing left to hide. We know about the real will, the bank transfers, the threats to Mr. Miller. We know everything." Linda's response was a bitter laugh. "You think anyone will listen to two little girls over their responsible, grieving aunt? I've cleaned up everything for you. All you had to do was stay quiet." Before Emily could react, Linda advanced, her anger boiling over. "Give me your phone!" she howled, attempting to snatch it from Emily's hand. Emily pulled away just in time, darting for the staircase. Down the hall, Sarah emerged, eyes wide. "Sarah, go!" Emily cried, tossing her the spare set of evidence-filled flash drives. But Linda was faster than they expected. She seized Sarah by the wrist. "You're not going anywhere until you tell me what you've done," she hissed, her grip cruelly tight. Emily lunged, using every ounce of adrenaline to wrench Sarah free. "Let her go, or I swear we'll go to the police right now." Linda's expression twisted. "Police? And tell them what? Emily, you know nothing for sure. It's your word against mine." A standoff. Moments ticked by in breathless silence, each woman poised for action. But Sarah spoke first. "I've already given copies to Marty, and the police know. You're the one out of time, Aunt Linda." For the first time, the bravado cracked. Linda's face flickered between rage and fear. With a last desperate gesture, she dashed to the door, shoving Emily aside and sprinting toward her car. Outside, headlights swept the driveway. Marty's SUV blocked Linda in. Behind him, sirens pierced the quiet night. Ms. Alvarez, the housekeeper, had called the police the instant she'd heard shouting. Within moments, officers were at the door. Inside, Emily and Sarah held each other, shaking. Linda, cornered, tried to bluster her way through the accusations, insisting the girls were out of control and ungrateful. The officers, however, had already received Marty's dossier. The documents, the audio files, even a statement from Mr. Miller confirming Linda's deceit. Linda's eyes darted wildly as she was read her rights. "This is a mistake," she insisted, staring at Emily and Sarah, as if willing them into submission. "You'll regret this." But the sisters, arm in arm, watched as their aunt was led out in handcuffs, her reign over their lives finally ending. When the house was finally quiet, silent except for the hum of distant squad cars and the gentle dripping of rain on the windows, Emily and Sarah collapsed into exhausted tears. They had faced the storm and survived. Later, as dawn crept into the bruised sky, Emily stood by her sister's window and watched the light reclaim the battered home. There would be questions, investigations, and painful truths to process. But for the first time since the fateful accident, hope felt possible. The worst was behind them. They had not only defended their parents' legacy, they had found their own courage. The tense confrontation was over. But the bond between the sisters, tested, battered, but unbroken, remained. The future, for all its uncertainty, was once again theirs to claim. The truth exposed, morning sunlight crept in through the curtains, painting the Thomas house in a new, gentle light. For the first time in months, the weight of fear and suspicion had shifted. Emily and Sarah woke to a house transformed, suffused not just with relief, but with the raw, trembling uncertainty that comes after a storm. The night's confrontation played again and again in Emily's head. Linda's wild eyes, the flash of blue police lights, the sound of the front door slamming shut in her wake. But if there was ever a moment to pause, it was brief. "We're not done yet," Marty had cautioned them just hours before. The paperwork, the hearings, the questions, they're just beginning. But you girls have accomplished what most people couldn't. You got the truth out. As soon as the sun was over the rooftops, police cars returned, now calm and professional. Detectives and uniformed officers combed through Linda's office and personal quarters, collecting evidence the sisters had named: the forged documents, the laptops, the draft letters Emily had carefully preserved. Mrs. Alvarez, the housekeeper, made coffee for everyone, as if trying to return a sense of normalcy. But the air inside the house was electric. In the dining room, Emily sat with Sarah, their hands clasped tight. Linda had already hired a lawyer who would be present during questioning, but her authority was gone. For the first time, the girls' voices were the ones heard. One by one, people came to support them. Melissa from the bank, nervous but steady, as she handed police her statement about Linda's suspicious bank actions. Mrs. Hillman, with her hand-typed letter describing the odd destruction of mail. Mrs. Green, Sarah's art teacher, confirming Linda's manipulation of scholarship funds. Still, the process was grueling. Officers and child services staff shuttled Emily and Sarah into separate rooms, pressing for details, testing their memories. Emily was asked to recount, in order, each finding: the will in the desk, the real trust documents, the recordings, the threats. She answered with a clarity born of exhaustion, her voice firm but not angry. Sarah's questioning was different, gentler, but the unspoken question of trauma colored every inquiry. When the police gently asked if she had ever felt threatened, Sarah surprised herself by saying, "I was scared for Emily, not for me. I think Aunt Linda thought I was too young to understand." The truth, once spoken, seemed simpler than the web Linda had woven. Meanwhile, Marty, ever the steady hand, delivered his investigative files to two stern detectives. He laid out the timeline: the strange shifting of assets, the bank withdrawals, the conveniently missing files, and the chain of emails between Linda, Mr. Bradley, and the nervous attorney, Mr. Miller. All of it painted a picture, not just of one person's greed, but a conspiracy of silence, poorly disguised under a veneer of grief. Just before noon, the police took Linda, still in her tailored suit, but eyes hollow with shock, to the courthouse to begin formal charges: fraud, forgery, obstruction of justice. The possible list was longer than the girls had ever imagined, and yet the hardest wounds felt much older. The probate judge moved quickly. During the emergency hearing, the girls sat in a bare side room outside the courtroom, clutching the portfolio Marty had assembled. Their new attorney, one Emily had carefully chosen, reviewed the evidence for the judge and the opposing counsel. Linda's lawyer protested, but the handwriting, the signatures, the withdrawals, and, most damning of all, the recordings Sarah had made spoke for themselves. At last, the judge called Emily and Sarah in. They stood together before the heavy mahogany bench, flanked by their attorney. Emily's voice trembled as she repeated what she wished her parents could have heard. "Our parents trusted us. They never would have cut us out. All we wanted was the truth, and the family they hoped we'd always have." Linda was stone-faced at the defendant's table, but even she couldn't deny the mounting evidence. In the tense hush, her lawyer whispered frantically, but her posture sagged. At one point, Linda tried to pivot. "I was only trying to protect them," she claimed, voice strained, but the judge silenced her with an impatient gesture. The final decree was swift but powerful. All property and assets of the Thomas estate are to be returned to Emily and Sarah Thomas as joint beneficiaries, as stated in the authentic, original version of Mr. and Mrs. Thomas's will. The defendant, Linda Peterson, is to be remanded to custody pending criminal trial. There, in the packed wood-paneled courtroom, Sarah squeezed Emily's hand until her knuckles were white. It wasn't triumph they felt. Not exactly. Relief, yes. Trembling exhaustion, absolutely. But mostly, it was a slow, vulnerable return of trust. The news traveled fast. Calls and messages flooded in as friends, neighbors, and distant relatives learned the truth. Some apologized for not seeing what was happening. Others offered gentle comfort, casseroles, and quiet company. Back at home, a new process began: rebuilding. The locks on the house were changed. Sarah hung photos of her parents in the hallway again, each frame wiped clean. Emily fielded calls from the Thomas family's old business partners, who now took direction from her as executor. Legal paperwork, distribution of property, control of business assets, reversal of unauthorized deals filled their days, but they met the task shoulder to shoulder. Sarah's world, too, began to expand again. Her teachers rallied support for her art applications. Her friends returned, awkward at first, but warmth soon returned. She began to look at her phone less and sketch in the old sunroom, reclaiming spaces that had once felt haunted. Emily discovered a well of resilience she hadn't known she possessed. She learned endless rules of probate law, balanced ledgers, and rebuilt her parents' charitable plans where Linda had erased them. When she read her parents' names on legal documents, she no longer felt like a child, looking for approval, but like the guardian they had trusted her to be. And yet, there were wounds and questions. Over quiet cups of tea, Emily and Sarah spoke late into the night about the chasm Linda had dug between them. "I wish I'd seen it sooner," Sarah murmured once, but Emily shook her head. "We did what we could. Mom and Dad would be proud we fought for each other, even when it was hard." Months later, as Linda's trial approached, the sisters agreed to testify. It was not vengeance, but accountability they sought. In the courtroom, they spoke calmly and clearly, never hiding from the pain or the lessons. In the end, Linda was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and forgery. The knowledge did not undo the past, but it secured the future. On the day the final legal documents arrived, Emily and Sarah sat together on the back porch, watching the trees sway in the same autumn wind that had begun this ordeal. "We're still here," Emily said softly. "We're still together." Sarah, for the first time in months, broke into a genuine smile. "This is home," she whispered. The truth, finally exposed, closed a painful chapter, but opened another, one of rebuilding, forgiveness, and hope, healing and growing up. The weight of Linda's betrayal had receded, replaced by the tremulous, slow-building work of mending. In the weeks and months following the trial, the Thomas house gradually shed the aftershocks of suspicion and unrest. Sunlight once again streamed unimpeded through the kitchen's stained glass, and the air lost that lingering, tense stillness, like the held breath of a storm passed over. Emily and Sarah stood shoulder to shoulder as they began this unfamiliar chapter. The world, at last, had grown quiet enough for them to hear one another. But trust, like any precious thing cracked by force, needed careful coaxing before it would shine again. Rebuilding their bond, Sarah initiated the first gesture. One chilly morning, she left a mug of tea outside Emily's door, along with a small, hand-drawn sketch. Two stick-figure sisters, holding hands under a golden sun. Emily found herself choking up more at that than any lawyer's letter or courtroom decree. "Want to come sketch with me in the sunroom?" Sarah asked quietly later that day. Emily smiled, a genuine one this time, and nodded. If there was awkwardness to their company, it soon dissolved in the warmth of soft conversation and laughter, rediscovered after too long submerged under fear. Bit by bit, they relearned the rhythms of sisterhood, splitting chores, sharing midnight snacks, working together to dust and arrange the heirloom family photos that Linda had once hidden away. Emily began telling Sarah about her parents, not just as victims of a tragedy, but as complicated, loving people, full of quirks and stories Sarah was finally ready to hear. In those retellings and confessions, the gulf between them lessened, replaced by a tighter bond than either had known before. Taking over the family legacy with the legal work completed and the estate restored, Emily was named executor, as her parents had originally wished. Balancing bills, investments, and the family business tested her in new ways, especially as she was still learning and often doubted herself. Some days, she stared at spreadsheets until her vision blurred, longing for her parents' guidance. But she surprised herself with her resolve. She rehired longtime employees who'd been fired under Linda, and re-established charitable projects her mother once championed. Everything from food drives to scholarship funds Sarah helped design. In every meeting, Emily spoke with clarity and honesty, discovering, little by little, the voice she thought she'd lost. Sarah, for her part, turned her pain and hope into art. Her acceptance letter to the summer studio art program arrived with a scholarship funded by the family trust, a full circle moment that left both girls teary-eyed. In her new studio, tucked behind the house, she painted scenes of memories. Her parents laughing in the garden, her and Emily curled together reading, Linda's silhouette fading in a doorway. Her art became therapy and testimony, a way to say what words could not, learning the lessons of betrayal and forgiveness. Though the court had dealt with Linda, forgiveness was harder. The sisters spoke of her only rarely, each with their own mix of wounds and anger. Yet, as autumn faded to winter, they found they could talk about that shadow without feeling trapped by it. "Do you think she ever cared about us?" Sarah asked one evening, the fire crackling between them. Emily took a while to reply. "I used to think she just wanted control," she said. "But maybe part of her did care, even if she didn't know how. Some people confuse love with possession or fear." Sarah nodded, then tucked her hand into Emily's. "I don't want us to become bitter," she whispered. "We won't," Emily promised. "But we'll remember." They learned to let go, not of the truth or of the lessons, but of the weight. Slowly, their world grew safer, softer. Emily found herself able to sleep through the night again. Restless dreams replaced by real rest. Sarah returned to school with a quiet strength, no longer so easily swayed by the opinions of others, creating their own traditions. As the seasons changed, the sisters found new ways to honor their parents and themselves. Together, they hosted a winter gathering in the house. Neighbors, old business partners, bank employees, and teachers all mingling among the rooms. There was music, trays of homemade snacks, and the warmth of community, a stark contrast to the isolation that had once wrapped the house like fog. During the gathering, Emily gave a short speech. She spoke not of Linda or the court case, but of gratitude and hope. "My parents built this home on trust and kindness," she said, voice unsteady but proud. "We lost our way for a while, but we found it again, thanks to everyone who stood by us and to each other. My sister and I learned that family isn't just about blood or inheritance. It's about choosing to believe in people, in second chances, and in ourselves." Sarah raised a toast with her favorite mug. "To tomorrow," she said, and the guests echoed the sentiment. A new chapter, growing up together. Time did not erase what they'd endured, but it stretched over the pain like a gentle balm. Each day brought new decisions, new memories. Emily learned to trust her instincts and seek help when needed. Sarah began mentoring younger students, using her story to encourage others to protect what mattered and to seek help when they felt powerless. On the anniversary of their parents' passing, the sisters visited the gravesite hand in hand. The air was cold, the trees nearly bare, but they spoke together, out loud, freely for the first time. Emily shared the little victories and even the failures. Sarah spoke of her dreams, her gratitude, and her forgiveness, not just toward Linda, but toward herself for ever doubting her big sister. They left flowers on the grave and returned home, lightened and older in spirit. Epilogue. Always beginning again what Linda's betrayal had shattered. The sisters rebuilt, not exactly as before, but perhaps stronger and wiser for the cracks. Their family legacy was not only preserved, but renewed. Emily and Sarah understood, more deeply than most, that loss and hardship could be survived and even transformed into compassion and courage. Life presented its own challenges, but the past no longer defined their present. Instead, Emily and Sarah Thomas stood together, two sisters, a little battered but unbreakable, forever changed and always growing. And in the heart of their restored home, hope lived on.